Alright, let's take a look at these block comparisons I made back in 2022, comparing them to under 23 players. Now, bear in mind, this is 2022 we're talking about. In the footballing terms, a lot has happened since then, and a lot of these players aren't even 23 anymore. Let's start with these four in my part 1 vid. So I think this was around the time when the Neo Eagle East League just started. I think, yeah, just around that time. Starting off with Isagi and Musiala. Now my mindset behind this was the Muller Isagi comparisons. So obviously I thought Musiala would be the next step behind Muller. Obviously the playstyle is completely different now that I watch him, but back then that was my mindset behind that. So it makes sense. Even though I don't like the comparison now, when I look back on it, it does make sense. Bartra and Rodrigo, I think it's a hit. I genuinely think it's a hit. When it comes to technical on the ball, perfect match. When it comes to finishing, perfect match. I think that's a hit for me. I think I got that spot on. Also, I'd probably say Rodrigo is heavily underrated as well, and I would say Bartra falls into that category of just being underrated in terms of the series or in terms of the other players or other caliber of players. Now, Nagy and João Felix, I think it's another spot on category that I got right. Because what we're seeing with Felix now is a fall off right now. Can he pick himself back up at Chelsea? We don't know. Because right now he's fallen off. Felix is one of my favourite players, but I feel like he's fallen off most definitely. And we're trying to see the way Nagy's storyline is heading is going down that same trajectory where he's peaked very, very quickly and then he might slowly be declining. Now, Barra and Vlahovic, I don't really know what my mindset was behind this. I think I was just looking for a player that was like under 23s that just had that similar build, that type of Ronaldo presence. I'm talking about the striker type Ronaldo presence, but I think I couldn't think of anybody else to compare Barrow to that was under 23 at that time, which is probably why I went with Vlahovic, because I think I was going to use Haaland, but I used Haaland for someone else in a different part. But overall, I'd say in that one, I'm definitely 2 for 4. Okay, now let's talk about this one right here, because this one was controversial for some reason, and I don't think it should have been controversial, especially the first one. But this comparison, the first comparison I did back in 2022, was Sai and Odegaard. Now this was in 2022 where Odegaard didn't have the levels that he was at right now, but I still thought Odegaard was a class player regardless. And people were saying it was Arsenal bias. The comments were hating on it, saying they don't see that comparison at all. They were disrespecting Odegaard so hard. And I wasn't even making this comparison based off the Arsenal Odegaard. I was making it based off the Real Sociedad Odegaard. Yeah, I think I hit that one nail on the head because I thought that was a banger of a comparison. And then when I seen the comments about it, I was like, did I miss on this one? But me personally, I always knew Odegaard was going to be a great player. Now, the IQ and Matthijs de Ligt comparison, I think I was looking more at the de Ligt in Ajax back in Ajax days when he captained Ajax at 19. And IQ being another young captain as well, I thought that's where the comparison came from. I think that was my mindset during that time when I was thinking about it. Now, the Shido and Haaland one was another one that people were disrespecting on. When it comes to, because people were forgetting that I'm doing this based on under 23s players. So this is not the whole world. So obviously people were saying Shido has comparisons to Zlatan, this and that. I was comparing these players to players out under 23s. And I think the Shido and Haaland one matches perfectly. This is why I would have went in part one, I would have went with Shido and Barrow, but Shido and Haaland just made way more sense to me. Shido and Barrow just made way more sense to me in terms of being a pure goal scorer. And then the Loki and Mbappe one, that one doesn't need an explanation. That one speaks for itself. Okay, so let's move on to part 3, because this one is interesting. Now, bear with me here. This was 2022. So let's start. Rin and Gakpo. Now, I know now for Liverpool, that seems like it's just a complete miss. But Gakpo for PSG was a baller. But when it comes to those net shots outside the box, Gakpo was on target with those. He was precise at PSG. And that's why I went with Rin, because the shooting type was exactly the same. I didn't go based off Rin's playmaking or his other attributes. I just went based off the shooting and the way to shoot the ball. And to me, I thought that was a hit. And people were agreeing back in 2022. Obviously, Gakpo, we don't see that type of side of him anymore. Looking back at it now, I'd probably go with someone like Bellingham for Rin right now, especially the Real Madrid Bellingham. Maybe someone else, I'm not sure. But I think when I made that, I was happy with that one. Chigiri and Alphonso Davies, I think that one's another easy one. I think just the pace merchants, the way they can just bomb past players, I think that one was a hit. Now Rayo and Bellingham. Now this is a Dortmund Bellingham. Bellingham hadn't moved to Madrid at this point, so we're talking about Dortmund Bellingham. And I couldn't think of any other midfielder that would match him. To be fair, I thought about Frankie De Jong at the time, but I don't think Frankie De Jong was under 23 at that point. I can't remember, but I think Bellingham and Rayo was a good match at that time. Saka and Kenya. This one hurt me to do because I rate Saka so much. Even back in 2022, Saka was still a baller. He's carried Arsenal since the day he stepped into that first team. But I think in terms of play style, I think the way they beat players on 1v1s, I feel like they were very similar at that time. Saka is I feel like it's disrespectful to put Saka with a player like that. But at the same time, it's just a comparison at the end of the day. And I feel like player styles, they matched. For that one, I'd give myself, I say 2 out of 4 again. I feel like the Rin would have been a 3 out of 4, but Gakpo has kind of declined since PSV. Okay, now let's move on to part 4, because this one was weird. Because Kaiser and Ness were very, very difficult to find comparisons for, especially in 2022. So for Kaiser and Scamacca, I just felt like, in terms of being a striker, I just looked at their body type, their height. Scamacca is a booter as well. I rate Scamacca. So I thought, you know what, I'll just go with Kaiser. I couldn't think of anybody else to go with him that would match Kaiser's playstyle. But I think I did well picking Scamacca. I feel like that was an underrated pick. Florian Wirtz and Ness, I feel like in terms of their midfielder attributes, I feel like they match perfectly. I just feel like Florian Wirtz does way more attacking wise in terms of goal scoring wise. And I feel like especially now what he's doing now with Leverkusen, I feel like this wouldn't be a good match, but back then I feel like this would have been a good match. Karisu and Camavinga, both of them in terms of Blue Lock, Karisu is one of my favourite players. In terms of real life football, Camavinga is definitely one of my favourite players, and I feel like this one was a good comparison. Just in terms of how they read the game, how they can control the midfield, especially at that age as well, I feel like this one was a very good comparison. Mudryk and Aita, this was before Mudryk obviously went to Chelsea. I feel like just the way they just head down run, they can beat players. Well, Mudryk I don't know about now, but back then he was definitely beating players in a 1v1. When they're on, I just felt like 2 wingers, they matched up perfectly. I feel like that one was a hit. So that one, I would argue I went 4 for 4 on that one. And these were the only 4 parts that I did. Obviously at that time, this was just when the Neo Eagles League just started, so there wasn't other players to go off of mainly. But I feel like I did pretty well, especially in 2022 compared to how they are now. I still feel like I did pretty well. There's a few misses in there, but I feel like majority of them are hits.